I learned one of the most important lessons of my life from the most unexpected place, my first day at a new job. Never interrupt someone who's building the case against themselves. My coworker smiled, picked up a framed photo from her desk, and proudly said, "That's my fiancé." I recognized him instantly. We'd been married for 7 years. She kept talking, believing I was just another new employee. I kept listening, because by the time she finished, she had unknowingly handed me everything I needed to take back my life and make sure they both paid for every lie. My name is Lily Harper. I was 33 years old, and after 11 years in corporate marketing, I had finally landed the job I'd spent months chasing, a senior brand strategy position at Northbridge Capital Technologies. At 8:31 I stepped onto the 22nd floor carrying an iced Starbucks Americano in one hand and my laptop bag in the other. I thought that morning was the beginning of a better life. I had no idea it was the beginning of a war. What I found sitting on my coworker's desk that morning, nobody, not my lawyer, not my husband, not even the woman smiling beside me, could have predicted what would happen over the next 17 days. And if you've ever trusted someone with your entire life, stay with me until the end. Because what happened after that photograph changed everything. My manager, Rebecca Collins, walked me through the open office. "Everyone, this is Lily Harper. She just relocated from Chicago. She'll be leading the East Coast Consumer Division." A few people waved. Someone joked about surviving the Monday morning meetings. Another employee was already on his third espresso, while CNBC played silently on a wall-mounted television. Everything felt normal, until Rebecca stopped beside the desk directly across from mine. "This is Emily Carter. You'll be working together almost every day." Emily looked about 27. Long chestnut hair, perfect white blazer, the kind of smile that made strangers trust her within seconds. She stood and hugged me before I even expected a handshake. "I'm so happy you're here," she laughed. "I've needed someone to keep me sane." I laughed politely. Then I sat down. My laptop was still booting when something caught the corner of my eye. A silver picture frame. Nothing unusual. Except the man in the photograph was my husband, Ethan Harper. Same navy Ralph Lauren polo. Same crooked smile. Same tiny scar above his right eyebrow from a skiing accident in Aspen 6 years earlier. Even worse, the picture had been taken in Maui. I knew because I was the one who had taken it during our anniversary trip in July 2023. I had framed that exact photo. It was supposed to be sitting on the nightstand in our apartment, overlooking the Hudson River. Instead, it was sitting on another woman's desk. For exactly 3 seconds, the entire office disappeared. The conversations, the keyboards, the phones. Everything became silent. My heart didn't race. It slowed. That's what people never tell you about real betrayal. Sometimes it isn't loud. Sometimes your entire life collapses without making a sound. I looked back at Emily. She noticed me staring at the frame and smiled so brightly, it almost hurt to watch. "Oh," she said, picking it up with both hands. "Isn't he handsome?" I smiled back. The same practiced smile I'd used in boardrooms, negotiations, and presentations worth millions of dollars. "Who's that?" I asked. Emily's cheeks turned pink. "My fiancé." She said it with absolute certainty. "We've been together for almost 3 years. 3 years. I felt every lie Ethan had ever told me quietly line up inside my head. Business trips to Boston, investor dinners in Midtown, weekend conferences in Dallas, late night client meetings that somehow always lasted until midnight. Emily laughed. "We're getting married this December." She held up her left hand. The diamond caught the fluorescent office lights. I recognized that ring, not because I'd ever seen it before, but because Ethan had told me 6 months earlier that the markets were unstable and we needed to be careful with unnecessary spending. Apparently, luxury only became unnecessary when it was for his wife. If you've ever believed a lie because it came from someone you loved, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Stories like this remind us why the truth always matters. Even when it arrives wearing a smile. Emily leaned closer. "You know what's funny?" she whispered. I almost didn't date him because he told me he had some complicated history. Then she smiled. But he said all of that was finally behind him. I kept smiling. Because at that exact moment, Emily still had no idea. She was talking about me. Emily turned the silver frame toward herself and gently brushed a fingerprint off the glass. You know, she said with a quiet laugh. Ethan isn't really a picture guy. I had to beg him to let me keep this one. I nodded as if we were discussing vacation photos between meetings. Inside, every memory I had trusted was beginning to crack. It was 9:12 a.m. Outside, the rain had turned into a steady drizzle against the floor, to ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Someone in the next apartment was microwaving popcorn. A Slack notification chimed every few seconds across the office. The world kept moving. Mine had stopped. So? I asked casually. Opening my laptop. What does your fiancé do? Emily smiled immediately. Private equity. He's launching his own investment company before Christmas. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Ethan had told me he was evaluating new opportunities. He never mentioned building an entirely new company. He works so hard, Emily continued. Sometimes I don't see him until 11 at night. 11, exactly the time Ethan usually came home, smelling like expensive cologne instead of boardrooms. Then Emily said something that made my stomach tighten. I know some women complain about successful men always working. She laughed. But honestly, I don't mind sharing him with his career. Sharing him. If only she knew, or maybe she already did. That question stayed in my mind longer than I expected. Around 12:20 p.m., the marketing team walked 3 blocks to Hudson and Green Kitchen, a busy lunch spot where the smell of grilled sourdough and roasted garlic filled the room. Nobody knew that the woman sitting beside Emily was actually Ethan Harper's wife. Not one person. While everyone talked about football, stock prices, and weekend plans, Emily talked about Ethan, constantly. He surprised me with tickets to Napa last month. He booked us the penthouse suite at the Langham in Chicago. He keeps saying once the company launches, we'll move into a place overlooking the river. Every sentence matched another lie Ethan had told me. Every busyness trip, every investor dinner, every delayed flight. I stopped hearing Emily's voice. Instead, I heard Ethan's. I'm sorry, Lil, the client dinner ran late. Boston again next week. This deal could change everything for us. Us, the word suddenly sounded disgusting. Back at the office, I didn't cry. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I opened an Excel spreadsheet. The file name looked harmless. Q4 Market Analysis Final.xlsx inside. It had nothing to do with marketing. Column A. Date. Column B. Lie Ethan told me. Column C. What actually happened. 1 row became 3. 3 became 11. Then 26. By 4:40 p.m. I had matched nearly 8 months of fake business trips, using nothing more than Emily's stories and my own calendar. The pattern was terrifying. This wasn't an affair. It was project management. Every lie had been scheduled, budgeted, repeated, perfected. Just before 5 o'clock, Emily wheeled her chair closer to my desk. Lily? Yeah? I need another opinion. She unlocked her phone and held up a picture. A breathtaking engagement ring, nearly 3 carats, emerald cut, platinum band. He spent almost $42,000 on it, she whispered proudly. He said I deserved the very best. I stared at the photo. 3 months earlier, Ethan had convinced me to postpone renovating our apartment because, according to him, cash flow mattered more than appearances. I smiled politely. It's beautiful. Emily grinned. I know, right? He's always telling me I'm the future he's been waiting for. Future, that single word erased the last piece of denial I still had left. At 5:18 p.m. employees began leaving for the evening. I stayed behind. Through the lobby's revolving glass doors, I watched Emily step onto Vesey Street. 5 minutes later, a black Audi A8 pulled to the curb. The driver's door opened. Ethan stepped out. White dress shirt, navy tie loosened, the same watch I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. Emily ran into his arms. He kissed her forehead, opened the passenger door. Then they disappeared into downtown traffic. I stood behind the glass entrance without moving. The October wind rattled the flags outside. People walked past me carrying umbrellas. Nobody knew that I had just watched my husband pick up his fiancée, while his wife stood less than 40 feet away. That was the exact moment I stopped asking one question. Why would he do this? And started asking a much more dangerous one. How much has this betrayal really cost me? That night, instead of driving home, I scrolled to one name in my contacts. Olivia Bennett, family attorney, forensic asset specialist. I stared at her number for nearly 30 seconds before pressing call, because something told me the affair was only the beginning. Olivia answered on the second ring. Lily? I need you to tell me one thing, I said, standing outside my apartment, while cold November wind pushed dry leaves across the sidewalk. If a husband secretly uses marital money to build another life, how badly can that end for him? There was a brief silence. Then Olivia spoke in the calm voice that had won multi-million-dollar divorce cases across New York. Very badly, if you can prove it. That sentence became my entire strategy. Over the next 12 days, I stopped acting like a heartbroken wife. I became an investigator. Every credit card statement, every wire transfer, every hotel receipt, every airline confirmation, every client dinner, every fake conference, every bank notification, it all went into one encrypted folder on my MacBook, labeled Winter Campaign 2025. Nobody who saw that folder would have guessed it contained enough evidence to destroy 2 lives. Then I found the number that changed everything: $486,000. Nearly $500,000 had quietly moved from our joint investment accounts over 22 months. Luxury hotels, designer jewelry, a down payment on a penthouse overlooking the Hudson, seed funding for a new investment firm. The paperwork listed 2 founding partners, Ethan Harper, Emily Carter. The company launch was scheduled for Friday, October 24th, at the Plaza Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. More than 50 investors had confirmed attendance. Emily couldn't stop talking about it all week. This is our beginning, she told everyone in the office. She had no idea it was actually the end. Friday evening arrived cold and clear. At 7:42 p.m. I walked through the revolving doors of the plaza, wearing a tailored black dress and carrying a leather portfolio. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne. A giant screen displayed the company logo, Harper Sterling Capital. Ethan stood at the center of the room laughing with investors. Emily held his arm proudly. For a moment, I simply watched. 2 people who had spent 3 years building a future using my marriage. Then I walked forward. The room grew quieter with every step. Ethan looked up. The smile disappeared from his face. Emily frowned. Lily, she said. What are you doing here? I stopped directly in front of them. Then I smiled. The same thing every wife should do. I came to meet my husband. Silence. Complete silence. One investor slowly lowered his champagne glass. Another looked from me to Ethan. Then back again. Emily laughed nervously. What? I looked directly into her eyes. You've been introducing Ethan as your fiancé. I paused. I've been married to him for 7 years. The room froze. Emily turned toward Ethan. Her smile disappeared. You told me your divorce was finalized? I answered before he could. There was never a divorce. Then I opened my leather portfolio. Bank statements, wire transfers, property records, corporate filings, every document neatly organized. I handed copies to the lead investors. My attorney has already verified every transaction. I spoke calmly. The startup you're about to fund was built using money taken from joint marital assets. Another page, the penthouse down payment. Another page, the jewelry. Another, the vacations. Another, the equity transferred to Emily. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended Ethan one by one. The investors quietly closed their folders. The oldest man in the room finally spoke. "We're withdrawing," another nodded. "So are we." Within 3 minutes, the ballroom began emptying. Deals worth millions disappeared before Ethan's eyes. Emily looked like she couldn't breathe. "You knew he was married?" I asked. She looked down, then whispered, "Yes." The room felt even colder. "I thought," she said through tears, "I thought he'd leave you." Ethan reached toward her. She stepped away. "I gave up 3 years of my life for lies." Then she walked out. She never looked back. Security quietly removed the company banners while hotel staff began clearing the room. Ethan stood completely alone. No investors, no partner, no future. He looked at me with exhausted eyes. "You've ruined everything." I shook my head. "No. You ruined everything the day you decided 2 lives were better than 1. The following Monday, Olivia filed for divorce. The court immediately froze the penthouse purchase. The company's accounts were investigated. Every dollar taken from our joint assets became part of the legal record. 6 months later, the judge awarded me the majority of the marital assets, after documenting years of financial misconduct. Harper Sterling Capital never officially opened. Emily disappeared from the industry. Ethan lost his licenses, his investors, his reputation, and the future he thought he had already built. The same man who once said, "Trust me," ended up standing alone inside a courtroom, explaining every receipt he thought nobody would ever find. As for me, the apartment overlooking the Hudson was eventually sold. I moved into a quiet brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, adopted a golden retriever named Winston, and started my own consulting firm. People sometimes ask whether revenge made me happy. The answer is no. Justice did. Because revenge is about hurting someone. Justice is about making sure they can never do the same thing again. And looking back now, the most expensive mistake Ethan Harper ever made was believing his wife would never start asking questions.